I have had the opportunity over a few years to do a lot of interviews. And one interview that I'll always remember is a conversation I once had with Phyllis Diller. We were doing a special on Bob Hope, and I had asked Phyllis if she would give us some of her remembrances, some of her thoughts about Bob Hope, because she traveled with him on USO tours for many years. And so we showed up at her home in Los Angeles, and she let us in, and we sat in her living room by the big grand piano, and we were all ready to go, cameras rolling, and I asked my first question. Do you remember the first time you met Bob Hope? Well, in classic Phyllis Diller form, she let out a huge cackle of a laugh, and she looked down at my feet. And she said, "My dear, what size shoe do you wear?" And I said, 7.5, AA. And she said, "Just what I thought." And she ripped the microphone off her lapel, took my arm, started leading me down the hallway through her bedroom and into her closet, which was about the size of my living room. And I remember spinning around trying to take it all in. There were gowns from every era and hats up above near the ceiling, and then there were the shoes. There must have been 200 pairs of shoes on the wall. And I was looking at this, looking sort of at everything, and I turned around, and there was Phyllis in the middle of the floor, methodically taking shoes off the shelf. Before I knew it, there was a huge pile of shoes in the middle of the floor. She looked up at me in a voice I hadn't heard, in a tone I hadn't heard in her voice to that point. She said, "My dear, I've been waiting for someone who would listen to the story of my shoes." Indeed, every shoe had a story. A different story for a different season of Phyllis Diller's life. Shoes she wore with Bob Hope dancing on stage during Vietnam. Some hot pink pumps she'd worn as a mystery guest on her favorite show, What's My Line. Flat brown sandals that she'd worn to help poor children around the world on humanitarian missions. Some of the shoes reminded her of her kids. She'd raised 5 and had beautiful grandchildren. Well, for the better part of an hour, Phyllis Diller and I sat in her closet and tried on her shoes. And after the last shoe and the last story, we went back to work. I finished the interview, and I went back home to my apartment in New York. About 2 days later, there came a knock at the door. And I opened the door, and there was a delivery man, and he was holding a big black suitcase. In fact, it's this big black suitcase. And I smiled as I opened it up. And there were 25 pairs of Phyllis Diller's favorite shoes. Well, I think of that story often because, like Phyllis Diller, we all wear different shoes. Maybe you are wearing shoes you love, shoes you think are perfect for your feet. But I bet there are a lot of you out there who aren't wearing the shoes you thought you might be wearing at this particular stage of your life. Perhaps the shoes your neighbor is wearing look more stylish or more comfortable than your own. Maybe you feel a little lopsided, like you've got one foot on one shoe on one foot and another shoe on the other foot. Maybe your shoes are just flat worn out. And if you're wearing shoes you don't really want to be wearing, are you accepting that as part of the Lord's will at this particular stage and season in your life? I'd like to talk tonight, sisters, about embracing the season you're in, finding joy and happiness in every shoe you slip on or lace up every day. At the core of my testimony is the belief that God knows me, and He loves me, and I know that He knows you, and I know that He loves you. There is a very specific path laid out for each one of us, a very individual path for our lives and for the mission of our lives. And it's up to us to have the faith to find out what that path is, where it leads, and to allow the Lord to guide us there.